So welcome Aditi, Ellie, and soon Alex. We'll start the meeting in a minute. After I go over this online meeting opening, welcome to the October 20th, 2022 Seattle Design Commission meeting. I'm Valerie Keenas, staff to the commission. Our meetings are designed to meet the governor's executive orders, allowing online meetings during the COVID pandemic. Our meetings are being recorded through WebEx and posted later on our website. On the agenda today for the day, from 10 to 11, SDOT staff will brief us on the city's public life program. From 11 to noon, we'll do commission business. From noon to 1, we'll have lunch. And from 1 to 1:30, we'll have business again. And then in the afternoon, from 1:30 to 4, we'll get a briefing from Sound Transit on the West Seattle and Ballard Link Extension project. The meeting format, this is a briefing and not a regular CIP. We will take public comment, and I'll say more about that in a minute. We'll go around the room for commissioner comments here in the room, and then each commissioner who's joining virtually will make comments and ask questions together, not separately, in one round, alphabetical by first name. And then when we're done with the first round, we'll probably go around again and give everyone another chance to make comments after they've heard everyone. Benita will lead that discussion. If any members of the public are here, we'll allow for public comment after the presentation before we go into our discussion. And to do that, we ask that you please raise the raise hand function in WebEx, which is in the lower right-hand corner. And we allow 2 minutes per person for the public to make comments. And if you aren't able to make public comment virtually through WebEx, we're happy to follow up with you later. And then for the record, let's go around and do introductions of commissioners. First in the room.
Good morning, I'm Adam Amrine, Urban Planning Commissioner.
Good morning, I'm Molly Spatalnik. I'm the Get Engaged Commissioner and an urban designer, and I do want to disclose that my work on the Pike Pine Streetscape and Bicycle Improvements project, we're doing a pre and post occupancy evaluation where we sought the advisement of the public life study team, and we'll be including volunteers from their group. So if anyone has any concerns about my inclusion, I'm happy to step out of the room. Please let me know when you speak.
Okay, and then commissioners virtually, so it looks like Elaine.
Good morning, Elaine Wine, the Architect Commissioners.
Good morning, Elizabeth Connor, Artist Commissioner.
Morning, Jill Crary, At-Large Commissioner.
Morning, Erica Bush, Urban Design Commissioner.
I was on mute. Good morning, Matt Elfs, Architect Commissioner.
Good morning, Pooja Shah, Engineer Commissioner.
And good morning, Vinita Sidhu, Landscape Architect Commissioner and Chair.
Then Design Commission staff.
Wendy Gay, Design Commission staff.
Juliet Acevedo, staff.
Okay, so Aditi and team, please go ahead and introduce yourselves and then go ahead and start the presentation.
We have a slide for introductions, so maybe we can just get into the presentation and then share that slide and tell you guys who we are. So Ellie, would you like to share presentation? Thank you. So hi, good morning. Thanks for having us at the Design Commission to talk a little bit about the SDOT Public Life Program, share who we are and what we do. And we're really excited for the conversation here today and to hear your thoughts. The agenda, the way we've structured it, we'll start with some introductions and then get into a little bit of background into what the Public Life Program is, the tools we have and how we have applied them, where we want to go with those, and then the Q&A and discussion. The next slide has our introductions, and I'll pause after that in case, Valerie, you want to kick off other pieces of the conversation first. My name is Aditi Kambuj. I'm the Urban Design Manager. The SDOT Public Life team is 4 of us. We're a cross-cutting group of individuals from different teams and divisions within SDOT, and each of us brings something to the table in terms of a special skill to help manage the public life program, data collection, and discussion. Ellie, I'll pass it to you if you'd like to just share who you are in the department and sort of your role in the team. That would be great.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Ellie Smith. I'm a senior transportation planner at SDOT in the transportation planning group. I have been involved in this program since 2017. It kind of like spiraled after, or I guess dovetailed nicely with my master's thesis at the University of Washington, which was focused on public life observational methods. So I've been enjoying working on this project for the last 5 years. I'll pass it to Alex.
Hi, everybody. My name is Alex Hagena. I'm a data librarian in our asset and performance management team at SDOT. So I work with data management across our department. And so with the public life program, I've helped with designing kind of our underlying data infrastructure and also helping with analysis and visualization. And I also, in my graduate studies, I worked a lot in user experience. So there was definitely a kind of related sort of, a lot of related values and methods that kind of play into public life that we'll talk more about in a second. And I'll pass it off to Joshua.
Thank you, Alex. Hi, everybody. My name is Joshua Gahn. I'm an urban designer at SDOT working on a DT's team. I've been working with the Public Life program since December of 2019, helping conduct studies and produce reports. And I will pass it back.
Thank you, Joshua. Valerie, is it okay to just keep going with the presentation, or did you want to do any? Okay, thank you. One thing I just wanted to highlight on that team page, the SDOT Public Life program is a program with a small p in that it's not a formal funded program like many other SDOT programs are. So I think that's just something to highlight. The program evolved from SDOT's participation in developing the Gale Public Life data collection protocol several years ago under the leadership of one of our deputy directors who's since left SDOT. And since then, staff has come and gone, but the program lives because we are committed to understanding our public spaces and how they're used better so we can design them better and improve our sort of skill at doing that. So that's a little bit of background about our team. Thank you, Ellie. Next slide, please. SDOT has a mission, vision, and our 6 core values. Our vision is to get Seattle is a thriving, equitable community powered by dependable transportation. And our mission is to deliver a transportation system that provides safe and affordable access to places and opportunities. We are committed to 6 core values: equity, safety, mobility, sustainability, livability, and excellence. And the Public Life program is really centered on 2 of the 6 core values here, as well as the others. But the main ones are livability and equity, and really sort of response to these 2 values in SDOT's priorities. Our livability values related to our non-mobility functions in the right-of-way. As a DOT, we need to care about how people use these spaces and how they're designed to get the most positive outcomes for communities who use these spaces for meeting people, economic activity, people walking for the joy of walking, and it has a direct connection to our community health, particularly through the pandemic. We know that our public spaces took on much more meaning as a place to gather safely and build community. So this really responds to our livability value, our program here. And an equity value underscores that our outcomes should always advance equity for our communities. And our methods for getting there should be responsive to those outcomes. So we center race as well as identities in our efforts. And in the public life program, our North Star has always been how do we design and manage our public spaces to be as inclusive as possible and really prioritize the needs of the marginalized first. So the communities that we have for decades underinvested as a planning profession. And so we center racial equity in all facets of our work. Next, please. I hope you can hear me. I was having issues with my headphones earlier, so thank you. We also look to our larger policy framework and documents to guide our strategic priorities for the program, which include the pedestrian master plan and the comprehensive plan. The city of Seattle has clearly defined the value of and potential for our transport system to meet critical needs associated with community connection and public space. So not solely for streets and not solely for moving through, but also places and destinations for people to gather. In particular, our policies seek to increase the amount of stationary activity, the amount of social activity, and the amount of economic activity in our shared right-of-way. So we believe our investments should be made with these ends in mind. Thanks, Ellie. We're also centered and working and guided by SDOT's Transportation Equity Framework. You all may be familiar with this framework. It is the roadmap for SDOT decision makers, employees, stakeholders, and partners, as well as the greater community to collaboratively create a more equitable transport system. It's built on the city's Race and Social Justice Initiative and starts to address the disparities that exist in our transport system due to decades of systemic and institutional racism. The TEF has several tactics related to every body of work at SDOT. And some of the relevant ones that we wanted to highlight to you today that relate to the public life program include a tactic that discusses surveying transit riders at stations and stops to understand safety concerns about those environments. We also have a tactic in there about building trust with communities that we have underinvested in historically and engaging with them through the design and planning process of our projects more holistically. There's another tactic about building budget and time into all our projects for community engagement, including the planning phases. And how we've used the public life program on some of our projects has been very inclusive in how we've gathered data to understand the study area, the project area, and often with the community that is using those spaces on a daily basis. Okay, so with that, I will pass my word to Alex, who will take on the next few slides to talk about what is public life. Thank you, Alex.
Thanks, Aditi. So how do we define public life? So this is, really the activity that happens in our shared spaces. When you walk out the door and head to the grocery store or head to work or spend time at a park or in a plaza, in any of these public spaces, the activities that happen there, this is public life. And these, are simple things like waiting for transit at a bus stop or meeting a friend outside of a cafe. There is, this is kind of this beautiful swath of activity that happens in our city. And it's as simple, as meeting a friend to kind of more complex interactions and activities that happen in these critical spaces. And we kind of really see the need to, as managers and stewards of the right of way, and of all these public spaces that we share, we kind of really see the critical need to understand what activities are happening, how they are happening, and to measure that so that we can invest wisely and have more strategic decision making as to how we're managing these public spaces. Slide. So yeah, how do we go about measuring public life? We have kind of our are kind of like two core key studies that we undertake when we do a public life study, are looking at how many people are moving through a space, who those people are, what mode they are they riding on a bike, are they using micromobility, are they in a wheelchair, so we look at how people are moving through space, and we also look, in addition to that, to how people are staying and lingering in a space. So again, we're staying in a space, and we're seeing how many people are there, who are they, the demographic information about who they are, and how long they are lingering in that space, and what activities they are doing. So typically, kind of historically, departments of transportation look at traffic volumes or pedestrian volumes. And this is kind of like a progression from that, in that we look, not just at the numbers of people walking through and the number of vehicles moving through space, but actually what are people doing, and how can we, use that, understanding what activities they're doing and who are doing them, to kind of further add more data and insights to how these spaces are functioning. So this is also, one of the great parts of a public life study is that they are kind of very just interesting, and very kind of engaging for folks. We've worked with dozens and dozens of people, and with many different partners throughout the city, on several different studies that we'll dive into later on in this presentation. But this kind of this type of study is very kind of relatable, and is a great way to kind of engage with the community and with stakeholders, and with kind of all the people that are involved in these public spaces. So we also we use kind of like common urban design sort of criteria. How safe is a space? How comfortable is a space? How enjoyable is a space? And so we kind of use those as criteria to kind of, well, how do these activities kind of fit and make a place feel more safe, or more comfortable, and more enjoyable. And then with this data, and kind of with these sorts of criteria, we work with people to kind of then think of ideas on how to enhance the experience of that space. So we talked about kind of what public life study is, and now we kind of move into like, okay, well, how do we actually design this study? And so in 2017, we worked with several other partners, different cities, to put together what's called the Public Life Data Protocol. So this is really kind of the instruction booklet for how you go out there and collect data. So this gives you kind of all the different sorts of data points to collect in a standardized format. And this is kind of the like figuring out that sort of like core guiding kind of foundational sort of system to use when we're going out there and collecting data. So, like I was saying, in 2017, this is when the public life program got kicked off, and this was largely due in part to developing the public life data protocol. As we had talked about, we did a test study, so we went out to block faces and streets in the city to kind of test this out and see how it works, and to use that to further develop the protocol, and also to kind of operationalize this sort of study and this sort of methodology at SDOT. So Further from there, in 2018, we conducted a citywide study. So we used the protocol and conducted studies across the city at more than 100 locations in 38 different neighborhoods across the city to kind of get a baseline sort of data set, a baseline public life data set. And I'll kind of quickly go through these because we're going to dive into these later. But so from there, we have all of this data. We're building kind of this data. And so we then kind of tied that into the department's performance management system and the metrics that we use that we're reporting out on a regular basis to show how we are doing. And so we built out a dashboard as part of that. So this is a tool that allows anybody to kind of look and see all the data that we've collected. And we also built like a pretty, just like an interactive experience to the data so people can zoom around and look at their own neighborhoods or whatever neighborhood and see what all the data that we've collected there. 2019, we took a more kind of focused neighborhood level approach. So what we call the Public Life Action Plan. So we looked at spaces in Pioneer Square. So this was in partnership with Parks, Seattle Parks Department as well. So we looked at City Hall Park, Prefontaine Place, Fortson Square, a couple block faces on 2nd Avenue Extension South. So these are, very key, critical parts of Pioneer Square and of the city, historic areas tied into our transit network. And so there, we went and we studied all of these sites from, as I was saying, kind of like the stationary, looking at how people are staying, how people are moving through. We also conducted intercept surveys, focus groups with different stakeholders throughout the neighborhood. And the goal there was to really have this sort of package, this toolkit that we can build out where we collect data, hear from stakeholders and from the community and engage with them, and then to provide an informed set of recommendations for how that we can improve these spaces based off of all this data information that we collected. And then in 2020, we continued to do public life studies during the pandemic. There was newly activated spaces that I'm sure many of you have seen or experienced, where restaurants were now newly permitted areas for outdoor seating. And so we knew that we wanted to go and see how that was functioning. So we went out and looked at several sites in 2020. We also we conducted a study in McGraw Square and also on Ballard Ave most recently in 2022. And then I will say in this past 2 years, well, when we started off, we were collecting data on paper. So we were out there in clipboards, tallying data. In 2020, we started to use an app to collect data, which we've been using since then, which has been a huge improvement, not only to just kind of the underlying process and to saving paper, but also to kind of getting more people involved with the process. So we're kind of like always looking at ways to involve more people and to be more innovative. So from there, I'll pass it on to Ellie to kind of go deeper into some of our studies and our analyses.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, now that we've kind of gotten a sense of the trajectory of our program over the last 5 years, I should say, I'm just going to give a little bit more information about the different ways in which we find use for this type of public life data. As Alex really already touched on, our first landmark study and project for our team was in 2018 when we conducted the citywide study. And I will say it was the first for any municipal transportation agency in the country to apply the public life data protocol at scale. So it was very exciting to be a part of and to be able to have access to an immense amount of data, understanding how people are using our block faces. We were able to work with a consultant to collect this data. They had 7 staff basically out on our streets all summer long in 2018, representing over 1,500 hours of observation. So we have a very robust data set that's available on our website if you ever want to kind of look through and see what that looks like. We designed the study to really focus on a variety of different urban contexts, as you can kind of see on the right-hand side, reporting out in terms of the urban center, urban village, framework to understand, and this is really at the highest aggregate level, activity in terms of people moving in the orange bubbles and people staying in the green bubbles. In general, we could have a separate conversation just about what we found in this study. But in general, we did find that there were some interesting differences based on kind of the context at hand, with really some surprising results in those neighborhoods that are outside of urban villages and centers that are still really vibrant commercial districts, and seeing how much activity is generated there, particularly on the weekends. We had intention to replicate this study every 2 years, as with the 2018 being the initial benchmark and having regular data collection efforts. The pandemic definitely threw a wrench in our plans a bit with that, so we've pivoted since then, but we do intend to replicate this study in the future in order for us to kind of continue benchmarking and tracking those key metrics related to gender of people using space, what's the proportion of people staying versus moving, among others. The second kind of typical use of public life data that we've approached and have kind of experience with is around the public life action plan, which we really developed as a framework in 2019 with a report published in 2020. And this is really a way for us to kind of apply a variety of different methods, including observation, but also the intercept surveys, focus group, community engagement, in order to come up with a kind of unified vision for how public spaces could be invested in. We see this as a really good template to apply to other areas, and it's been very heartening to see some of our partnerships, including the Capitol Hill Eco District, is really using this as a template and as a framework for advancing their own public space planning work. And we hope to be able to find the opportunity to apply these tools again in future locations. And then for a little bit more recent example would be our work in McGraw Square just this past year as part of a development proposal going on in that area. There's going to be right-of-way improvements as part of a public benefit package. And as the SDOT team and the city team, we saw the opportunity to infuse some public life data early in the process, ahead of really even identifying design goals for the space. So we were able to pull together internal stakeholders within the city, as well as the design team, to go out and collect data in the space, and use that as really kind of the basis for any sort of design, identifying programming and design goals for that project. Which is really interesting to be able to bring in a variety of partners and to be able to really speak the same language and be able to share insights from just spending an hour or two on site. So I'll just speak briefly to those last two examples I had in terms of the Pioneer Square Yesser Crescent study. Some of those observations and the findings that we were able to glean from those experiences of observing space and talking to folks using the space really lended itself to identifying some opportunities for improvements of 3rd and Yesler, specifically for safety improvements. And this was already kind of in motion in some way with the near-term action plan from One Center City, but the public life data was able to identify, desire lines of people moving through City Hall Park to Prefontaine Place, knowing that Prefontaine Place is home to one of the main head houses for the Pioneer Square light rail station. And that resulted in essentially some safety improvements that have been piloted this year and will be moving forward by reducing lanes, adjusting traffic signal timing, shortening the crossing distance for pedestrians, and giving pedestrians wider sidewalks in that area. And then on the right-hand side, this is just kind of a snippet of what our analysis might look like in any sort of public life study. But this is really showing McGraw Square from above, and the dots represent the posture that people occupy in space. And this was really interesting for us to be able to kind of point to the ways in which McGraw Square currently serves as mostly a passing through space. And it helped us also identify the key desire lines as people are moving through, as well as kind of where there is existing seating that just really isn't being used. We were fortunate enough to have a partner in the Downtown Seattle Association who has been collecting data in this area for a while. So we were able to compare to 2020 data that they had, which is actually just pre-pandemic. And so to be able to compare usage over time is also a key benefit to this public life data set that we're looking to build out further. Just some key takeaways to share with you all, and really kind of where we see the value add for this type of work. It allows us to produce new knowledge, and at many times as planners, we end up spending most of our time at a computer using existing data to inform our decisions. When we're talking about a space in particular, it's really critical to experience it, and a public life study is a very productive way to do that. And it allows us to move beyond anecdotes and really kind of quantify the social environment and allow for decision makers to have data at their hands and to help substantiate investments. To the second point of get scrappy, that's kind of the ethos of our team. We have been implementing these types of projects with very little resources. But the beauty of it is that these tools are very, very scalable. In theory, all it takes is a clipboard, pen, and paper. And so we've been able to execute so many of them in-house, which has provided a lot of value to our organization. Beyond that, building partnerships, I think we've said this a few times now, but actually getting folks to volunteer, to show up with us, to spend time in the space, is a great way to involve community and stakeholders and get them excited about the project, maybe glean new insight, and create an environment for buy-in. And then beyond that, I think it really aligns with the value that Aditi highlighted earlier about, people data is really an important way for us to get us closer to the equitable outcomes that we seek by being able to specifically narrow in on a particular user group and be able to understand how different people use spaces. For us moving forward, we continue to use these tools when opportunities arise. And over the next year, I think we have an interest in building out our infrastructure a bit more. We have access to a mobile app now, which just streamlines our process. And we also are looking to kind of build our bench of people within the department who are interested in this work and can take it on in terms of designing studies and implementing studies. And then beyond that, within our department and outside of that even, we continue to kind of promote these tools and additionally identifying opportunities for partnerships. As Aditi spoke to earlier, to really address some of the transportation equity framework tactics that we have at hand related to improving safety at transit stops. We see the public life tools as a potential opportunity for that. And then beyond that, we have a large effort going on with the Seattle Transportation Plan, including the People, Streets, and Public Spaces work. And as a key next step, identifying how we can engage community to build, design, plan public spaces in the right of way. And we want to, fold this into the process that comes out of that. With that, I think that's it for our presentation. Anyone from the Public Life team want to add anything before we open it up for questions?
Okay, well, thank you. It looks like we have a few folks from other departments or members of the public. So if anyone wants to make public comment now, go ahead and unmute yourself. Speak up. Okay, so I'll hand it over to Vanita to lead the conversation. This is just a briefing, it's not a CIP, so we can have a pretty free-flowing, ask questions, have dialogue with the presenters and each other, so free-form kind of. Vanita.
Great, thanks Valerie, and thanks all of you for your presentation. So let's plan to go in alphabetical order, which, if I'm getting that right, we should start with Elaine.
Great.
Oh no, Adam, sorry.
Okay, thanks, Vanita. And thanks to the team. It was really cool to see your work and how it's been applied kind of in real time at the Yes Sir example. I had just a couple of questions for you, and some of these might be basic, so I apologize. My first question, I was really curious about the moving from paper into the app, and then you said that you had a kind of a mobile-ready app. I was curious if is the app publicly accessible? Could I observe a site, on a Saturday or something and put it into your database?
Unfortunately, not at this point. Back when we would develop the Public Life Data Protocol, there was kind of this vision of having an open source data collection app. Unfortunately, we just didn't have the partners to make that a reality. So we've actually been working with Gale Architects on a trial basis to use their app, and we're formalizing that through kind of a partnership for next year with them. That said, in terms of data collection and working with community stakeholders, we do like the idea of kind of being able to house all the data that's collected and share that on our dashboard so that it is available to everyone. And we've been able to work with our community partners and being able to publish their data as well.
Just to add a quick note onto there as well. We also provide a guide for data collectors too, and on our website, if we're really trying to kind of engage as many people as we can. So if you're interested in collecting data wherever you'd like in the city, we're here to kind of help you plan that and make that happen and support that anyway. And you might not have access to the app, but there's always the analog pencil and paper, and we have those forms at the ready to go whenever. So
yeah, that's really interesting to hear. Thank you. I'll try to keep my questions brief, but I think some of your examples were on really robust and very well used and loved public spaces. I was curious if you've here's my question: how does this help, or does it help inform a site that maybe doesn't have quite such a robust public space currently? I'm trying to think of how this might be a tool to improve a site that currently doesn't have much public life, or is it a tool?
I can take my first stab and folks chime in. You're right. The tool is really great as a diagnostic to help tweak and improve spaces that are already kind of functioning at some level as a public space, maybe not as well as they could, or they're just opportunities to update them after, like, it's been 20 years since we last invested in it and the city has changed around it, etc. We haven't applied it as much on sort of new locations where we want to create new public spaces, but I think it does add value in that it could help us understand things like existing desire lines, existing lines of sight, existing noise levels, where are the edges that people tend to naturally walk along. So I think there is value in continuing to use it in that scenario. I think we may not have a lot of examples to show you right now because we're not there as a program that has funding for new capital projects. So we've so far used it kind of opportunistically on urban design led projects or partner projects where either we've been able to identify that public life observations would be helpful, or partners have come to us to help study the space. But I think through the Seattle Transportation Plan, we're trying to create a new sort of element called the People, Streets, Public Spaces element, in addition to our bike, bed, transit, freight, etc. elements. And the idea would be that we can do more of these public life action plans at the community scale, coming out of that to understand neighborhood needs with community members, and then create more or new public spaces if those are the priorities there.
Great. Thanks, Aditi. This is kind of a related question, and I know you're kind of early in your work and you've done a lot already, but it seems to me that one of the really powerful uses of this tool would be to see how initiatives change the public life over time, like a post-occupancy evaluation. Have you been able to use it that way, or do you have plans to use it that way?
Yeah, McGraw Square is kind of like that. SDOT developed McGraw Square, I want to say 12 to 15 years ago as part of the streetcar, just after the streetcar station went in there. And it's really nicely used in the warm months. The pandemic really affected how it was being used. And I think it was a way for us to, as there's an initiative or funding to actually improve the space, to investigate how it could be better, or how did our public plaza design perform over time. And so that's one example that I can think of as that sort of evaluation. And we've been working with Molly a little bit on the Pike Pine study, which I think is really fascinating as well. That longitudinal long term.
Yeah, I don't know if this is within the scope of the program, but it would be really interesting to, over time, start to develop kind of best practices, or what was effective and what wasn't effective, because we as planners all assume things are really, effective, and we have all these things we love to do, but it's hard to know. And so this seems like that might be a way to test that. And then with that, I will pass it to, is it Elaine?
It's me. Great, thank you. Really interesting work that you guys are doing, and encouraging that there's such thoughtful participation going on in the city. I have a couple of questions. Maybe I missed this, but are you collecting demographic information about the people utilizing the space? I see heads nodding.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, we collect age groupings and perceived gender, and we have in the past, to the best of our ability, collected information on race in order to kind of inform how what we're seeing on the ground is representative of the local demographics based on census data. So those are the key things that we're measuring.
Yeah, because I was thinking about that in terms of how to attract what's not there. If that's, might be one of the goals of some of the outcomes of improving these public spaces, or making them feel more equitable in the future. So that's great to hear. I kind of, I had similar questions about Adam, about, you guys are looking at some existing hubs, and how do you fold in, new opportunities in the future. So it sounds like you will be getting out to neighborhoods and talking about that. I was specifically thinking about, are you collecting any information, say, on some of the new, I don't know what you call them, green streets or bikeways that were created during the pandemic? And just sort of recognizing, I think that, I think during the pandemic, like the amount of right of way that we have in Seattle, and opportunities to, you know, for individuals to really use that for their benefit. So sort of thinking ahead of how we could add to those spaces. I was also curious about how you're thinking about public and private use of those spaces. Like in particular, you know, with the proliferation of like the streeteries, you know, during the pandemic. And I'm a Ballard resident. And so, you know, I mean, that's been highly successful in the Ballard neighborhood. I think people really appreciate it. But then there's probably a balance question of what, you know, what's equitable, because you know, we're now giving up public space to people who can pay to maybe be in that public space, or that, you know, that restaurant that's now utilizing that public space. So I don't know, is there like a, how you guys are thinking about it?
I don't know, Ellie, if you want to chat about the Ballard, sort of what activities people are engaged in, but I can chime in as well after you.
Yeah, sure. So thanks for pointing out the Ballard Ave example. We were out there a couple of months ago collecting data just to understand the use, and it was very interesting because we actually had some comparison data from 2018 from one of the blocks, and we just saw kind of a skyrocketing in use, and most of that was due to you know, activation related kind of engagement. So people sitting in cafes, people you know, browsing the retail on the street. So yeah, I think we could basically just see the large growth in activity specifically due to that. I think where, and that's built into the protocol in terms of how you're measuring what's a public use versus, you know, a private use. So it's something that we track for sure. I hear your question about what's equitable. I think for us, you know, there's the question of you know, if you're replacing a parked car with a cafe, that's also a private use of the right of way. There's, you know, a person benefiting from that. So Aditi, what did you want to add to that?
I think you covered it. The only other thing I would think of in particular Ballard Ave, just the sheer increase in people walking on the Ave compared to the previous data. It's kind of staggering how many more people are visiting Ballard Ave as a destination. Which then, when we were having a conversation about the data, sort of people pointing out that, well, my teenager now just goes to Ballard Ave as a destination. They would go to a mall before, but now they're visiting it because it's the place to be, for example. So I think there's some spillover kind of effect from sort of the cafe uses as well there.
Yeah. Well, that's great. And I guess I would encourage, you know, because if that, like, right, all of that economic activity is sort of creating so much life and making a place that people want to be, that you're thinking about how, right, what are those linger moments, you know, what are those opportunities to create great public space for people that are lingering. And then this might be a really complicated question, but, you know, when I saw when you're collecting data, you're like, maybe there's 5 people sitting, there might be 3 people sleeping in a space, but I'm just thinking about how homelessness is affecting the use of public, you know, the use and perception of how like people want to use public space. And I don't know, I know that that's probably might be too much to like unravel here, but I don't know if you have any initial thoughts about what you've seen and how you're taking that into account in your studies.
Yeah, I will say, you know, this is a commonplace occurrence in pretty much every public space in Seattle. And the way that we approach it through a public life study is to really, from the point of view of an observer, be as objective as possible. That we will, you know, we do witness people experiencing homelessness when we're out there, but we are very careful not to assume anything about that. And I think the best way that we categorize it is really it's about the activities happening. So we're not trying to flag like how much homelessness is present in a particular area. It's just, is somebody sleeping? Is somebody doing something in public space that would normally be done in a private location? And in terms of the perception question, I think that needs to, observation isn't always the best tool for that, right? And so we would encourage, intercept surveys to better understand the impact of various activities on the dynamic of a space.
So you are recording like activities in space, like let's just say there's a tent in the space. So
we're not documenting that
you're not
necessarily,
documenting those types of things.
but we would
Okay.
say if we see somebody sleeping, that's the activity happening.
I see. Okay. Okay. I think those are all of my questions. So I will pass it to Elizabeth.
Thank you for that presentation. Also, I had a chance to look at some of the materials early on, and a lot of questions and thoughts came to mind. It's pretty interesting topic, and I also congratulate you for spending a lot of time on what is a small P program, as Aditi said. So thank you for that, all that effort. This is a little bit of a follow-up to what Elaine pointed out. I noticed that you had exercising free speech in one of the slides, and that immediately made me think, is it just free speech or is it also free expression? And maybe not, but that's something that came to my mind, because I think certain activities, not necessarily sleeping, but dancing, these certain activities sometimes are perceived as not appropriate in shared spaces. So this may be a question. Is free expression something that is included in free speech for you? Something a little broader than speaking?
Yeah, I mean, so to be clear, our public life studies haven't always emphasized free speech, just because it's not a common activity, to be honest, that we witness in these studies. It's one of the data points that we can collect information about, and we have in the past, and that includes performance is one of kind of the key activities. Cultural activities, we call it. I know this is kind of in the weeds with the actual data collection kind of buckets, but it is something that we can collect data on. It hasn't been a very prominent piece of our study so far, though.
Thanks, that's helpful. I also, I work on public projects as an artist, and so for years, decades, we've been asked, we as sort of a collective body of people, of practitioners, to not create places to sit in public spaces, not create artwork that could be sat upon. And so that's really intriguing to me and heartening to me that you're really, you're talking about increasing the amount of stationary activity as well as moving activity. What are your thoughts about that? I think there is a bias. It's not just sleeping. It's there's this space between perceptions of lingering and loitering. I know you can't solve this. I'm wondering what your thoughts are just going forward, because this is something that you want to continue.
Ellie, do you want me to, and Alex and others can start, but I'm sure there are many perspectives here. I think one of the things we're trying to do is sort of collecting data and quantifying whether people have the opportunity to sit, or whether there's a need for it, or how the space is performing generally. It's helpful to make the case for things like maintenance resources of public spaces, because a public, there may be sort of this cultural issue with people sitting, or issues around lingering, but I think our intention is to create as inclusive spaces as possible, which means spaces that are attractive for a variety of types of users, they're welcoming to a variety of types of users. And so having, from my perspective, programmatically, to be able to make the case for resources to help look after those spaces is critical, because that keeps them welcoming, clean, tidy, someone's picking up the litter on a regular basis, fixing things that got broken, etc. And I think our North Star is always not how to exclude activities, but how to bring how to make it more welcoming to more types of activities and community members is sort of the space I try to inhabit in these questions.
Makes sense. And I'm sure you have to guard against what you're doing extending into all questions as well. There's a lot of potential scope creep. You are continuing to build partnerships with other departments within the city on this, it sounds like. So that I think that's encouraging. I'm going to take nods, I guess.
Yeah, the transit partnership is a really interesting one. You know, our bread and butter at the DOT is mobility. Transport hubs are equal places to be and places to move through, right? And I think I'm really interested in thinking about how we can improve the experience of waiting for transit, doing things while waiting for transit, making it feel comfortable at all hours of the day, for example. So not just the peak commute times, but folks on alternative work schedules, et cetera. So those are all things that we're really excited about coming forth here.
Yeah, thanks for that. One thought I had, just as a final thought, when you were talking about collecting demographics and also expanding your data collectors, I'm wondering if you have a way to, or if you're already collecting data on who's collecting the data, because it sounds community that this data collection is a major community engagement activity. So it might be another way to find out who's not there, what's not there, which a couple of people already spoke to, Adam and Elaine. I think that's a real hard part of the project. So just a suggestion, and I'll pass it on to Erica. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm a big fan of this work, and I'm glad that you guys are continuing it post-pandemic. I do have a number of questions. I think in large part they've been touched on by Adam and others, Elaine as well, just on how I know we're in the process right now of redesigning Fortson Square. And given that there was the public analysis of that space, how or if the information that you received from that was able to influence that design that's in effect now. And similarly, as they start to look at improvements to City Hall Park, how those that analysis has and will inform that space. And I guess lumping into that as part of that activity, that if when you record activities for space, you're involving the negative as much as the positive. You know, I think it's really important that as we do see more challenges in our public space, that we're looking at how improvements can be made to make people feel safer and to dissuade people from using them inappropriately. So I'm quite a bit curious about that. I don't know, I have a few questions if it makes sense. I'd probably go through each one.
Ellie, do you want to talk about Fortson and the community engagement process back then? Or would you like me to?
I can talk about how it unfolded during the study itself, and maybe you can speak to more recent developments. Yeah, so our work on the public life action plan in Yesler Crescent, Pioneer Square, was timed very well with an effort going on to redesign Fortson Square. We were able to kind of glean some really interesting insights specifically in that space, and we're able to kind of do a bit of a heat map of where people are choosing to stay, what types of activities are going on, how that changes over time. And since there was already kind of a group of folks coming together on a regular basis to discuss design, it was well timed for us to enter that and throw some of this data on the table as an opportunity to kind of reflect on where the design was at that point, and then where any adjustments can be made. Aditi, where does the project stand at this point? I know you're more involved.
Sorry, unmuting challenges. So we're Erica was recently briefed on the 60% development as part of Pioneer Square stakeholder group. So we're taking the 30% concept and we're moving to more detailed design. Pretty excited to keep that going. I think some of the strengths for that space were, there's a good the right sidewalks, active building edges, even more so now with the new Alal building there, really nice views, and good, just sort of a good landscape buffer and ped lighting around there. But some of the challenges were sort of the lack of proper seating. It feels kind of dark for most of the year because of the tree canopy. And then there were a bunch of sort of sightline concerns because of the trees. And there's just a lot of rodent issues. If anybody's interested in learning more about that. But in the tree roots, which don't make it a welcoming space to linger. So the design is directly responsive to that, as well as sort of the immediate land uses around that and how it can be used as an indigenous gathering space. So lots of seating, lots of art, really careful design that's responsiveness to the context. So, and then City Hall Parks Department is keeping that conversation going. There's an interdepartmental team that got kicked off a month ago or so, and they're using the public life study as sort of their North Star and helping think through some of those opportunities and challenges.
That's great. Thank you. My other question was also in line with Elaine's mention of the healthy streets. And in my observations, and I'm sort of curious if you all had any of these, was that in more affluent areas, there was a larger acceptance of the healthy streets and people feeling comfortable in utilizing those streets to a greater capacity. And in areas that were less affluent or more diverse, people were more apprehensive to step into those environments because simply, well, I think that there were some challenges in how that was maybe communicated. And so I guess my concern is that if the analysis of whether a space is used is going to be an influence on whether further improvements to that space happen, because I would think that we just might need to apply a different approach to those spaces versus simply putting out a sign that says this is a healthy street. So kind of thinking about how this analysis is used as a starting point, but then can sort of lead into greater discussions about how people perceive the communication of our public space and its use.
Thanks, Erica. We haven't actively partnered with the Stay Healthy Streets program, unless Ellie or Alex you advised or anything in the last few years. But what we have emphasized to the Seattle Transportation Plan process and the People Streets Public Spaces element is that work has to happen at the community scale. We've learned a lot of lessons from our payment of parks programs and other things about, it has to come from the neighborhood and people who use the spaces, what the priorities are. And we hope to be able to be responsive and have a broad range of tools to then respond to those public realm and public space needs. So there are some adopted concept plans and things that we have that have gone through an engagement process, and they're more mobility focused, and that's the more people streets side of things, but the public spaces end of that spectrum has to sort of be co-developed with at the very granular scale, and that's the direction I'm hoping we can take.
Great. And I'm sorry, I'll ask one more question and then pass it on. But as part of your analysis for spaces that seem to encourage more activation, was there a depiction of which frontages along the spaces were active, or if challenges of sort of the private meets public realm and how that influenced people's site?
Sorry, I wanted to just do a quick time check because we were supposed to go to 11, and I know I just saw, I think Josh says you have to drop off soon. Aditi and Ellie, are you able to stay on a little bit longer? Should we try and wrap up real quickly?
I can totally see my time too, because I have to jump off.
I can stay for another 10 minutes or so, I think. Yep.
Same here.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt. And why don't you address that question? Maybe we can try and go quickly through the next.
So, Erica, you're finished, right? So, so I think that this is fantastic and great work what you've done. I think it's really interesting your slide pre-pandemic about where people were, because I think if you could have done that snapshot during the pandemic, it would have flipped completely. Because vitality comes from having people around, and I think the vitality followed people home for the pandemic. You know, I was so worried about neighborhoods, businesses collapsing during the pandemic, but neighborhoods were vital and full of people. And so I think even those neighborhoods that aren't part of urban villages, streets and stuff, probably would have been very successful in many parts of the city. You're looking at livability. You picked that as one of them. And we've danced a little bit around activation. People have talked about commercial activation. Elizabeth's talked about art. But I'd like to talk about how we expand this. And maybe it's not just SDOT as a department, but we as a city and the commission as a group that are supposed to be advocates for the public realm into programming. So were you able to do any kind of studies of McGraw while DSA was actively doing programming in that space as compared with when not?
Yeah, just for the purposes of the study that we did earlier this year, that wasn't really the research question we were going after specifically. So we didn't prioritize activation in terms of how we scheduled our data collection shifts. That said, I know that DSA has been collecting this data for years, and I know that they have a lot of counts to that effect that can speak to changes based on what activation is happening in that space.
We also in addition to the public life observation study, did a survey, just an online survey of the types of things that the immediate community would want to do in that space. And that's something we've done for another project in Belltown as well. More sort of, is this a space to gather, the role of the public space and the network of public spaces, right? And the things that sort of really emerged, because it's a small space, is sort of, it's really popular at lunchtime to sit, to people watch, to wait for the train, etc. And Westlake, with its a lot of programming, sort of serves as that highly programmed public space a couple of blocks from there. So I think there's that sort of role in the community aspect as well. But good points, Jill. Thank you.
Well, and how can we help you? Because, you know, water features are programming. Passive programming also brings people. Art installations are programming. I mean, think about Prefontaine Place if that water feature worked versus if it doesn't, since it doesn't. And, you know, as we move into, especially looking, I think, at the International District Station, I was just reading the other day about the new people activating the second floor of King Street Station, but how about that public space right outside? And we've got to get somehow that to be part of the study of where that Sound Transit Station goes, the activating of these spaces. So how do we help you bring parks, not just parks about maintenance, but parks as programmers and activators, and the Arts Office, and the Department of Neighborhoods, and OPCD, and us into this, so that we can go from studying things to advocating for things? I think that's really my big question.
That is a big question. Oh, I think let's keep talking, right? I mean, resources obviously are always helpful because, you know, we're a small group. We are very opportunistic right now. So pivoting to more of an intentional application of this, you know, will take resources. And we have great partnerships with parks, you know, at Occidental, for example, and other places. I think it's the really small public spaces that are very challenging. And with our grid, we have a lot of those little triangles everywhere.
Right. And, you know, and maybe, I mean, I'm good with a clipboard. I mean, maybe we can talk about how around specific programming people can do, we can do data collection that helps to advocate for that. Anyway, that's what's just my thought. And I think we as a commission can talk more about that after we let you guys go. So that's for me. Thanks.
I think I'm next. I applaud this work, and I think it's really, really important. I think it's a great presentation. I think my colleagues on the commission have raised some great points. I don't really have anything to add other than just echoing or amplifying what Jill just said, which is how can we go from studying to advocating, and so I look forward to supporting that, and I'll pass it on.
All right, so I will make mine quick. So similarly, I'm hugely supportive of the work and appreciate seeing it. I appreciate the differences between the level of information you can glean from the observation studies and the surveys. So I'll be curious to hear, we don't need to cover it now because I know we're running low on time, but understanding the labor needs that differ between the survey technique and observation, because I think that survey technique can be really valuable for, particularly when it gets to equity. Having done some of the observation studies, it's quite challenging to guess someone's race accurately. So really, I'm really interested in those survey techniques and applying those when they're needed to understand more acutely who's using the space and how they self-identify. So similarly, I'm curious what resources will be necessary to apply that technique as well in things like station areas or Third Avenue, if and when it comes online. I'll be curious to hear how we can support you all in continuing those studies to the degree that's necessary to glean the information we're really looking for in terms of equity. And I will pass it along.
I would just echo those same comments on data collection. I didn't have any other comments to add.
Great. Yeah, I'll just wrap up. I think the discussion has been good, so I also don't have any new questions, but I am curious along the lines of Jill about how we can use this to apply it, and even besides these like more major potential projects, like where a transit station is, but like how can we bring some of this thinking into the SIP process for those of us who just work on projects and just get the kind of comments from traffic operations about, the like really mundane stuff. Like, what if there was a lens that was taking it from this point of view and kind of pushing for those other elements? So, because at least I'm not seeing that happening when I go through those permitting processes. But thank you so much for this work. If anybody had any final comments, please raise your hand. Okay. Go ahead, Aditi.
I would just say, this group of four sort of serves as a kind of an internal consultant in some ways for projects to help advise. Even if we don't have resources, we can help advise on designing a study, and folks can do a study for capital projects. So, you can always suggest that to projects that come your way that you think could benefit from more observational studies and other survey types as well, and direct them our way.
Yeah.
We want to try and normalize this as much as we can in our toolkit.
Absolutely, yeah. We're, kind of at a point where we're really pushing to operationalize this and institutionalize this at SDOT to, formally tie it in with processes and projects. So we're building more and more momentum and building our data sets and building our partnerships. So with you, just having your awareness and your engagement and knowing that this set of tools is available at any time, and we've taken an opportunistic kind of approach to this in the past, and we're just always trying to kind of thread it more closely into processes to SDOT. So just having your support is super critical for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.